I would say for someone starting on this side of the industry, being able to deliver bad news with grace and care is something that's really important. Because if we're at somebody's house, it's a bad day.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by mold assessment consultant, Evan Bache Wiig. Evan, did I say your name correctly? Can you tell me?
You nailed it.
Okay.
You nailed it.
Thank you. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. I should have asked you that ahead of the show. I'm sorry about that.
Nailed it.
So, can you please tell me what you do for a living? You wrote to the podcast in an email, and I was fascinated by your work.
Certainly. So in Texas, we have laws that govern mold and water damage. So I'm a mold assessment consultant. So our role is to, depending on who our client is, we'll go into a water damaged building, water damaged residence, and we will write a remediation protocol that our client can then present to a mold remediation contractor. So Texas keeps us and the restoration company separate.
So who writes the mold rules for remediation in Texas?
So there was a committee that was my entire industry was pushed by Texas legislators, by the insurance companies. They said that because of the mold claims that were being paid out before these laws were in place, they told legislators we need laws governing how this stuff is handled. So there was a special committee that was by our state legislature.
Interesting. Because there was so much of it, the industry decided that there needed to be rules to follow, right?
Correct. It was getting, there was no independent party to state how things should be done, to take indoor air quality samples, to make judgment calls on what needs to be done, how bad conditions are, et cetera.
Wow. So how did you get involved in this work?
So I was doing restaurant inspections for a corporation. And so I had 40 restaurants or so that I would inspect each month. And I was doing everything
stuff?
from code compliance to everything across the board to help the franchise. And that was wonderful while I was single, but I was looking for something different. Once I got married, I needed a little higher income. So I was looking around for a different job, and my now business partner was looking for an apprentice at the time. So he's done mold assessing for 40 years. So he was looking for an apprentice, basically. And so my sister goes sailing with Tom, and she got us an introduction, and it's been perfect. It's been a perfect relationship. It's been a fantastic job and a great man to work for.
That's awesome. So how did he get involved in it? I mean, It sounds like he was ahead of the curve as far as the rules we were just talking about.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. So he started, before the laws were in place, he owned a water mitigation company. So once the laws were in place, he decided to go on the consulting inspection side, and he basically gave away his equipment and company to a very close friend, who now is a fantastic, top-notch restoration company, and basically built this from the ground up. I consider him one of the best in the business, if not the best, as far as what we do. Very, very knowledgeable, very experienced, very kind. He's a great man.
We'll talk more about the kind of projects you do, but for starters, I'm not really familiar with the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Can you talk a little bit about your climate and how it affects your work?
Sure, certainly. So we're in climate zone 3A, mixed humid, I believe. So the humidity component is a big one. We also get heavy rains intermittently, hot summers, so a lot of solar vapor drive, a lot of irrigation, which also plays into the solar vapor drive, causing issues with houses. In DFW, we have a lot of old pier and beam houses, so very, very, very few basements in our climate zone, especially in DFW. We have, I think the rock is just a couple of feet down, so it's very expensive to excavate. But largely it's pier and beams. So with with our area, we have a lot of rain, a lot of irrigation water that collects underneath these pier and beams that then, as it dries up into the house, creates a lot of mold issues. And then the other side of our area in DFW is that housing is, booming. So as builders are struggling to keep up with demand, there's a lot of, I'd say, construction defects and building failures.
Quality control problems.
We do a lot of work for builders.
Is it envelope stuff or is it bad cooling systems or both?
Everything that you can imagine. And so we also will do, HVAC related. They oversize stuff often, creating mold issues. A nail will pierce a PEX pipe and it'll be slowly leaking for months. Or they'll just do a bad job taping. They're using that, I guess I shouldn't use name brands, but they're using the cardboard sheathing materials, structural panels here.
I bet they don't call it cardboard. If I had to guess, Evan.
No, I can't remember I can't remember how they call it, but I can think of the brand.
Thermoply, right?
Yes. Yeah. And there's a couple of others that they'll use. What I have seen is that you get this patchwork of which commodities are available. So oftentimes you'll get kind of whatever's on the job site. So they'll have structural panels in the corners, and then they'll kind of just patch together whatever. I've even seen like foam board insulation used as a sheathing material in non-structural applications, and then posted some pictures without exposing the builder to our Instagram, All Mold Pro, of 3 different types of tape. I think it was like Tyvek, Zip, and something else that they had all combined on a single joint, poorly, I would add. And my point to consumers was, this is a $1.5 million house. Get phased inspections. So what my boss and I always say is we'll be busy for a long time.
Wow. Do you have a lot of brick, like much of Texas, which adds, I'm guessing, to the solar vapor drive problem?
What was that?
Do you have a lot of brick veneer that would make the solar vapor drive a bigger problem, right? Because that gets wet and then gets heated by the sun, and that forces it inside where it condenses on the drywall because of it's air conditioned, right?
Yeah. And a lot of that is exacerbated by, like on a pier and beam, we've got a brick veneer, and then inside of that, you often have the weep holes are occluded by that mortar that just piled up in the bottom of the wall. And then moving in the wall cavity in a pier and beam, if you have a wire penetration up through the bottom plate, that just acts like a little humidity chimney. And as water is sitting in the crawl space, it dries up through that little penetration. And when you open those up, you just have, stud bay to stud bay can be clean, full of mold, clean. So it makes it a challenge to find sometimes.
And we'll talk more about your toolkit and how you find stuff, but what are some of the problems you routinely see, and what are some of the things that you would tell people to be paying attention to that would indicate a problem like you would see in one of your inspections?
I would say for like slab on grade homes, largely that is just monitoring fixtures. And so what I often promote with clients is a automatic water shut off, something like Flow by Moen or Leak Defense, brands like that will detect pressure drops and then shut the water off automatically and then text you. Some of them have little sensors that go in each cabinet or behind the dishwasher. Early detection is key. So if you get something dried out within a day or two and dried out correctly, hopefully they won't need me. And that's, we're thankful for the business, but if a client doesn't need me, that's a good day for them. I would say sprinklers, like we were talking about with reservoir cladding, like brick, sprinklers, drainage. Those 2 things alone are huge players in creating mold issues.
Is it just a matter of not aiming the sprinkler at your house? Like, why is that hard to get?
Well, as a homeowner myself, it's what I see often is you've got landscape companies that come in, a couple times a year, add some mulch to the side yard, and it ends up being piled a full brick above the foundation line. And then you've got the routine sprinklers because everybody loves flowers and grass, and they're either pointed at the brick or they're saturating that soil, and it's either going into the wall on a slab on grade or it's just going straight into the crawl space and then drying up into the house on those pier and beams.
Are there other things that you see often, that make you scratch your head?
We just had one, I shouldn't say wonderful, but my boss and I really enjoy a good challenge. And so we had a wine room in a very expensive house it had a crawl space penetration in it, like a scuttle hatch in the wood floor. And then it had a supply and a return vent also in the wood floor. And it turns out that the standalone unit that was cooling that wine room to like 60 plus, 60-ish degrees, 65, it was short cycling because the vent was blowing on the thermostat. So it was creating a short cycling issue, which then elevated the humidity, which grew mold on all surfaces in that wine room. So the stuff that I see, those are the kind of things that I really enjoy because it requires a lot of thinking, a lot of expertise, and I really enjoy those head scratchers. So there's a lot of very unique situations that occur in our climate.
Are there certain styles of houses or even specific builders or time periods that you've observed are especially problematic with mold issues?
Yeah, the thing I tell my clients is every house will have something. So it's always good to keep perspective that, mold is indoors and outdoors at all times in the air. And with all that mold needs to grow is moisture and cellulose, building materials. And so, bearing in mind that every house will have a little bit of something. But as I'm approaching a house, I'm looking at, and even before we get there, I'm looking at, is it a pier and beam? Is it a slab? Was it built during a boom time in like the 90s or 2000s? Is it a 1920s or 30s with a basement, over by the lake? Is it, I'm looking at construction practices for the time, building styles like pier and beams, maintenance. So all of these things I kind of take in before I get to the house to kind of make some assumptions. Another big issue in our area is the prevalence of stucco. And stucco is very popular, but if it's, again, built hastily, single crack, especially like a horizontal one or poor flashing, it's just a nightmare scenario with a stucco house. So each house has its own set of unique challenges.
When you get a call from a prospective client, what do you ask them and what are you trying to learn before you even go and have a look?
So Tom is the master at interviewing our clients and understanding what their needs are. And we're a really good team in that he'll take the phone calls, understand what the client needs, spend a lot of time with them, understanding what's going on. And then I have an apprentice myself, Jesse, who's been a huge blessing. It's awesome. So Tom does the interview, and then we'll go and do the inspections. But the questions that he's asking are obviously square footage, location. We use the Central Appraisal District or Zillow, websites to look up the house as we're talking to the client to kind of get a look at it. Google Maps, let's look at the front of the house. And usually what we're after is understanding what their purpose is. Are you sick? Are your kids sick? Are you selling? Are you buying? Are you a landlord? Are you a tenant? Are you in an apartment? And then from there, we'll discuss sampling, which I can get into now.
No, go for it.
Talk about.
I was going to ask you,
later.
is among your questions, does it stink like mold in your house? Because I've been told by folks who do your work, it often does.
Right, and that's what's going on there is as mold has both moisture and cellulose. If you can smell it, that means that the mold is off-gassing, called MVOCs or microbial volatile organic compounds. So if you're able to smell it, that means it's actively wet and growing. But once mold dries out and loses its moisture source, it's still present, but it's no longer viable and no longer off-gassing. So yeah, if you can smell it, it's definitely still wet, still rocking and rolling.
And so monitoring, I think we were going to go to next, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, yes. So part of what Tom discusses with them is what we've decided as far as monitoring is that we do turnkey pricing. So instead of saying we'll come out for X dollars and we'll charge you X per sample, well, we figure out what their needs are. So if they are, if they're struggling with what, from our experience, looks like a toxicity issue, we may suggest sampling for mold toxins or mycotoxins. But the base of the inspections is spore trap air samples. And those are cassettes that are placed in a timed pump. And those pass air over a adhesive microscope plate. And the particles in the air are captured on that microscope plate, which is then sent to a local accredited laboratory. And then they do an analysis under a microscope that tells us both types and amounts of mold per cubic meter of air. So that kind of gives us a rough baseline indoors and outdoors for the house. And then the mycotoxin testing is valuable if there's either a immune compromised individual or a large mold presence in the house. And typically, like with the house, like an old pier and beam with a 100% chance of mold being in the crawl space, there's a very good likelihood of mycotoxins being present. But obviously, the information is not always helpful for a client. So we try to gauge what their purpose is, and then tailor our sampling strategy to fit that need.
As I understand it, spores will show up in virtually any air sample, indoors or out. I'm guessing there are action levels that, normal versus this house has a mold problem. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're correct. And unfortunately, there's not like a total limit value that's established by a government agency for like lead or asbestos or industrial chemicals. No governing body, to my knowledge, is willing to touch that, what is a normal level of mold. And that's where the consultant comes in, is based on our experience, based on the needs of the client, and based on the structure, what are we seeing in comparison to the outside baseline? So they are not there are downsides to air samples. They're not perfect, and they're not always representative of the conditions, but they really help us determine cleanup, damage, exposure levels. So they're still a good tool for us, and they're, as of now, the industry standard.
You mentioned some of the reasons for typical inspections, either a real estate transfer or you or a family member is feeling sick from, you think, mold or what have you. And is it typically the homeowner? Is it a resident? Is it a landlord? Who's making the call? And then what's the next thing that happens?
Sure. Yeah, we get a large portion of our business is from builder for warranty work. So they call us because a homeowner's complained or something has leaked. There's an issue, and so they're our client, and so we'll go in and do our normal assessment, write a protocol so that can be addressed. I would say that our specialty is the environmentally sensitive community, and that could be someone that had a past exposure. Maybe they lived in a real nasty dorm room, and now the house they're in, they're symptomatic. But largely it's residential. It's homeowners that are either finding mold or are sensitized or their kids sick. That's largely where the bulk of our business is. And that's, I would say, our specialty.
And
so next steps is...
no, please.
Go ahead. So Tom will schedule it. And typically we do same day inspections. Time's of the essence when you've got mold in your house. So we come out the same day or the next day. We do the assessment, collect the samples we need to, and we typically get air samples and a protocol back within less than 3 days so that they can just, expedient is the name of the game, so that they can get their house back as quickly as possible, because it's quite the process. But once we give them the mold remediation protocol, they can then pass that on to a restoration company who can follow it and get the work done.
So this would be like a company that does repair after a burst pipe, for example, or would seal up your windows after a windstorm, right? And so are they equipped to do this kind of work? Is that complicated for them?
I would say yes. And I want to give credit to the restoration industry as a whole. It is, especially the mold and asbestos guys. Obviously there's lots of visible mold that you clean up, but as far as like with our sensitives, they're cleaning something they can't see, especially mold toxins. Cleaning something that you can't see is very difficult. So, props to them for the work that they do. And, my side of the industry relies on them. In Texas, there's very specific laws. There's licensing courses that are required for the company, the manager, and down even to the workers themselves. So there's very specific licensing that occurs. So yes, they are trained and capable. Part of what I help my clients with as well is selecting one that is also going to fit their needs and budget, because all of this is expensive, unfortunately. But helping them find a qualified contractor.
I'm sure it varies a lot, but are you like ripping out drywall and scrubbing stud
Hmm.
bays as an example? I mean, and is that like a room? Is it
Hmm.
like 8 feet of wall? Is it like an entire house? How involved are these repairs?
It can honestly be all of the above. So that's, I would say, the benefit of what I do is my goal is strictly to serve my client and to provide them with a protocol that is very specific with pictures, dimensions, arrows of what I found in the house, where it is, and exact steps for remediation. So to your question, if it's a pier and beam that had a pipe break in the crawl space, that could be 1,000 square feet plus of the underside of the subfloor that's thick with mold. And so those restoration companies are laying on their backs, either blasting or sanding and cleaning that lumber, and then putting an antifungal paint on it after they dry it. For a house, if it's a kitchen sink leak, which is super common, they may take out the cabinet bottom. They may detach the cabinets as a whole. In Texas, the houses aren't built for cold weather, so anytime we have a freeze, pipes are popping all the time. So with those kind of instances, sometimes it's a ripping out sheetrock throughout the house, pulling all lower cabinets. It can be extremely extensive throughout the house. So
We
all
could
the
talk
above.
more about pipes bursting in Dallas Fort Worth because you part of your email to the podcast was you said you keep those caps. I forget the brand name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. The
Shark Bite
shark bite, the
caps. Yeah.
press caps.
And the point that you were making is you
Mm-hmm.
need to have them on hand because when you need them, so does everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And the big box stores are empty.
So, like when you go
Yeah,
out to this house to look around, what's in your toolkit? I'm guessing you have a flashlight. I'm guessing you have moisture meters. I'm guessing you're doing a lot of
yeah.
observing.
Tools are the fun
Mm.
part. Mm. Yeah, the tools are the fun part. Um, so in my case, I keep I would say two to three types of moisture meters. So I have a pin moisture meter that's got two long pins. So I have short pins that can go just on the surface, and then I have long pins that can actually reach through the sheetrock, and I can test the moisture on the exterior sheathing. So it reaches like 7-inch prongs. And then I have a pad moisture meter that I can set to drywall, brick, white oak, ash. I mean, any of the wood types. Um, and then, even more importantly, I have a thermal camera, a FLIR thermal camera that I can use for imaging. And all that does is show me moisture. So if something's dry, it won't show up, but it really helps me map moisture well.
Can you briefly
I
explain
have the
that,
sampling
Evan?
pumps for the
That's
cassettes, as I
that's interesting
mentioned.
to me. And the reason that works
Mm-hmm.
is because the wet materials are slightly colder, right? And they show up on the thermographic
Mm-hmm.
image.
Precisely. Precisely. I have clients ask me, "Is this a mold gun?" I'm like, "Man, if they had a mold imager, you wouldn't need me." But the thermal camera, yeah, it's as the moisture is cooler than the surrounding air, you get a nice big um, dark purple splotch. The challenge with that is during the winter time, any air leakage is that exact same color. And so for the companies that are charging a minimal fee just to do a thermal scan, while valuable, you really need to be verifying with a couple of other moisture meters. But yeah, it's a really, really excellent tool for catching those really early drips or roof leaks, hidden moisture in wall cavities. It's a fantastic tool. And those things range anywhere from $200 to 25,000. So the middle of the road slash lower end is usually sufficient for most cases.
So what camera do you use as an example?
I use the FLIR EB40X, I believe, and new they're about $6,000. I've used the cheaper ones that are about $400, and they're perfectly acceptable. The change really is like resolution rate, screen size, battery life. So again, props to my business partner Tom. He takes wonderful care of us as far as equipment, and really enables us to do really good, thorough work because of the equipment he buys for us.
Well, that's the job, man. Like you got to have the right gear,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
who
So
pays
that
for
goes for
the
keeping the case.
repairs on the homes? Like, the plumbing leak, I'm guessing it's the insurance company. Do they pay for
Mhm.
your services too? And the mold remediation as
Yeah,
well?
that would be nice. I would. So we're direct pay to the consumer, our clients. They pay us directly. Mm, Some insurance policies keep a mold rider. Typically, the standard is like $5,000, which covers a little bit of us and a little bit of the mold, or covers us and a little bit of the restoration work. From experience, it's what I've seen is that insurance verbiage is extremely specific about the source. So if it was a hidden leak versus a burst pipe during a storm, or if it was a neglect, or what they see as a neglect of maintenance in like a kitchen sink. So there's many different reasons they'll cover or deny a claim. So typically, client pays us and client pays the restoration company, and then insurance comes into some capacity. And I really try to bear that in mind when I'm writing this. Is obviously we need to take care of the issue, but if we've got a little bit of water damage and the homeowner's paying for it out of pocket, does it really need to come out? Let's make that assessment. And that's part of what we do with understanding the client's needs.
That seems useful because, right, like depending on who you're listening to, they might be saying, "Oh, you need a new kitchen," right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we need to take all of this out. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think it's Texas, Florida, and New York are the ones that have laws that govern like that my role exists in. In other states, you're at the mercy of a restoration company that may say, "Yeah, we got to gut your entire kitchen," and they're being paid to do it. And they may be not to be crass, but in the pocket of the insurance company. And I don't know that happens a lot, but I know that they have close working partners. And so there's just a lot of pitfalls where consumers are just can be taken advantage of. Not always, but it can be. So
at a minimum, you don't know what you're paying for, right? Or who's paying. That's also a worry.
Right. Yeah. And part of the Texas laws also sets up that there's post remediation clearance where we can come after the fact when everything's opened up, dried out, cleaned, painted, and I can come and reassess it and make sure that everything's been done correctly per the protocol that I wrote. And then we can hold the restoration company accountable to that. And then once everything clears, we can provide a homeowner with a final all clear document, which when they sell a house, they can slap that down during disclosure time and they're good.
So what are the challenges of this work, Evan? I mean, you came from another industry. I'm sure that had its own challenges. I'm guessing you had a lot of travel, and I'm guessing you had to have expertise in a lot of different subjects. What's hard about this?
Right off the top of the head, crawling under houses. I say the pier and beams are a challenge.
It's gross under there, right?
One of the things, you never know what you're going to find. I have grown to love it because you never know what you're going to find. It kind of feels like the dark side of the moon because you can count on the fingers of one hand the people that have been under a house, and it's usually like maybe one or none. That's a challenge in that, like a 1920s or 30s house in our area, they used to build them on. There's a really really hard wood called Bodark, and they would build them on Bodark logs, 10 to 12 inches high, and that was the piers that they used to build them on. So there's instances where to get around and assess what's going in the crawl space, I have to scoot under the floor joists, and I have to like exhale and scoot to get around. So, but in the 7+ years of doing this, I have yet to come across a snake. It's usually just bugs. But obviously I have PPE that I wear, but I would say that's the challenge right off the bat. I would say for someone starting on this side of the industry, being able to deliver bad news with grace and care is something that's really important. Because if we're at somebody's house, it's a bad day. Something's happened at their house. So it's a challenge to be gracious, but also be honest with clients. You want to protect them and, take care of them, but the facts are the facts. So that's a challenge as well. And I would say also staying educated on new technology, what's available as far as sampling. That's also just takes a lot of time. But that's why I enjoy y'all's Fine Homebuilding podcast, is it really helps me grow in my building science knowledge and frankly learn about a different climate zone, which helps me be a better assessment consultant.
That's very kind. You mentioned that your work has taken you to other parts of the country. What's that about? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I actually just got back from a trip Wednesday. I went to Franklin, Tennessee for a long-term, very, very sensitive client of ours So she's ultra sensitive to mold toxins, mycotoxins. And so she flew me out to Nashville to do an assessment on a property looking at buying out in Franklin. And it doesn't happen often. I had a similar client take me to Pennsylvania, look at her mom's house. And I've been to Canada for another sensitive client's house. So typically the people that are flying us out, because it's expensive, they have an existing sensitivity and they really, really care about making sure that what they're investing in is good to go. And on those trips, we typically are doing mold sampling, mycotoxin sampling, and we typically will also add VOC sampling. And the volatile organic compounds in a house can be formaldehyde, aldehydes, diesel fumes, gasoline, personal care products, alcohol. It basically is a chemical signature of what's in the air in a house. And so on these extended trips out of town, we typically would do as much sampling as we can to get a really good picture of the house, because it's, this is their next home for our clients. So we want to make sure it's as safe for them as possible.
Are these folks you met in the Dallas-Fort Worth area previously, or are these folks that came to you from outside? Existing clients?
Typically, it's clients that we've had a long working relationship with. Either, we've known them for years, and each house change that they do, we check it, or they've had multiple issues at a house, and so we've checked the house. And so we've built a lot of trust and care with them, and so they're willing to pay to take us to the next location.
I've heard builders can be on the hook if you make promises to folks about how your building skill or methods could improve their health. How do you respond to that? Is it a worry that if these folks have mold problems, after you've given their house an all clear or had some work done or supervised some work or written a plan for them, that you could be on the hook for it not working or their health problems?
So repeat the initial question about the builders.
So I've heard that, like, if you're a good builder and you make promises to clients who have sensitivities to whatever thing, like I can build a house that is not going to create problems for you, or I can fix your house so you
like low VOC. Yeah.
Is that a worry?
I can't speak for the builders, but I think as with us or the builders, you have to be careful about what you're promising to the client. And so that's a skill that takes time. And so for the builders, a lot of them are building to code, and that's kind of the benchmark that they're doing. And so they don't make, from my understanding, promises about a healthy home. We typically don't interact with builders of that grade that would be building like passive house or, to those kind of standards where healthy home is an expectation. Typically these are like production builders, and they don't make those kind of promises. But yeah, if they did make those, if they do make those kind of promises and we come and show that that's not the case, that would definitely be an issue.
What about your own work? Do you worry about someone getting sick after you've written a plan and it's been executed? Is that a concern?
I do. It's something that's, as far as a liability standpoint, it's something that we'll do what we need to make sure that we take care of that client. If something else arises, or if heaven forbid we miss something, we'll always make it right. One of the things that I'm really honest with my clients about up front, which is part of what we start off every inspection, I spend time with the client, and that could be 15 minutes. That could be 2 hours. I had a very sweet lady that was just very, very ill, that had years of questions that had gone unanswered, and the internet wasn't helping. And so we spent about 2 hours answering questions before we even signed, an invoice. So part of that conversation is kind of educating them on what mold is like, how it operates. We're not doctors, but kind of talking about health effects from our experience with our clients. And then being cautious about, if you're in a 1930s pier and beam, the chances of you getting a perfectly clean indoor air environment that's a tough challenge. Maybe not possible if you're really, really struggling. Whereas if you're in a slab on grade, very simple structure, and it's been gutted for a remodel, I would feel a lot more comfortable saying, yeah, I think we can get this house to be the healthy home that you want it to be. So we try to cover that stuff when we talk to clients. But yeah, we think about it very much with each inspection and with each protocol.
It's really interesting. So how what are some like how do you learn about this stuff? Mold remediation and plans
Yeah.
for good builds. Like where's your go-to resource for information on
Mhm.
this subject?
Learning, I think is an addiction, and I absolutely love learning. And I would say my Tom has really encouraged that in me. Early on, he took 40 years of his knowledge and distilled it and gave it to me. I mean, one of the first things he sent me was a psychometric chart and said, "Learn this." And so he really showed me different places to learn. So that could be one of the early things I started to follow was Journal of Light Construction. Fantastic way to learn about everything from stucco failures to building practices. Fine Homebuilding has become a resource for me as well. They cover a lot of climate zones, so that's been really helpful for me. Um, there's a lot of medical publications from our like Real Time Labs is one of our providers, or is our provider for mycotoxin sampling, and they have they put out white papers every so often. A lot of it a lot of it is just personal research that as something comes up with a client, like stucco for instance, as we've gotten more stucco work, I try to read as much as I can about stucco. I talk to builders when I can. I talk to stucco installers when I can. So it's just a nonstop seeking good information and reliable information that really helps us be good at what we do. And then on the medical side, you have to be really careful about who you're listening to and what information you're getting. But I also have some trusted providers like Real Time Labs that are accredited, recognized laboratories that I will follow them and learn from them.
Is there a professional organization that is for folks like yourself that have trade shows and publications and the like?
Um, the on the restoration side, yes, the restoration industry is much larger than the mold assessment side of the industry. So that's kind of a lot of the research comes from the restoration side of things. We do have like I think it's the IAQ conference, which I think is in Austin. Um, and that's where we'll get a lot of really good research, brand new equipment, best practices. So yeah, there is some that we can go to, and usually Tom will attend the IAQ conference, and I'll be here working, and then we'll go through the videos. He'll save the videos and send them to me from all the sessions, and so yeah, there is some for our industry.
So, what's a really great day like being a mold assessment person?
The thing that is my favorite is I get to meet people. I get to see tons of pets and amazing artwork, amazing houses. So I find a lot of joy in just the exploration of these houses. Like I said, underneath the house is you never know what you're going to find. Um, I would say the most meaningful thing for me is connecting with a client and giving them information and peace of mind. Even in a bad circumstance where yes, the mold issue is still existing, but now they have information on what's going on. They're empowered to make decisions, and they have some peace of mind of what the next step is. As far as a good day is connecting with a client and providing that for them.
What about a bad day? What's that look like?
Bad day, bad day. I would say one of the challenges with my job is commuting. So DFW is a massive metroplex, and so and we service very far out. And so both Jesse and I will drive. There was a day last month where I drove 5 hours and I worked 5 hours in a day. And that was before even writing any reports. So I would say that's probably one of the bigger challenges. And I'm sure Jesse would say the same. It's, commuting times can be a lot. Um, I would say it's hard when, I would say the hardest thing, not necessarily a bad day, but the hardest thing is like a tenant situation. Kids are sick, occupants are sick, and I can provide them with a protocol and data. But when they don't have the financial means to take care of it, or it's not their house, so they can't take care of it, and they have nowhere else to go, that's a really hard thing to. It's a really hard day to give. Here's everything you paid for, but I know that they may not be able to do anything about it, and their circumstances aren't going to change. That's a really hard
Yeah,
thing.
and I think contractors universally have to deal with that sometimes, and it's unfortunate. Does your work make you worry about like indoor air quality? What do you look for when you go to a friend's or family member's house or a commercial building or the airport or wherever? I'm guessing you notice stuff. Yeah.
Constantly, constantly. Can't turn it off. Um, One of the jokes with our church community group of other couples is that I have a flashlight on me at all times. It's in a little holster on my side, and the joke is that I'm probably going to have it out looking at something, no matter whose house I'm at. So I have to reel it in and make sure if it's not wanted, I gotta resist. When I'm walking into a commercial building, first thing I do is I'm looking up and I'm looking at, how's the ductwork look? I'm always looking up in houses, looking for roof leaks, looking at ductwork, looking at, mechanical systems. I do think a lot about indoor air quality. The more that I've learned about like particle matter 2.5, which is just an ultra fine particle, the more that I learn about air quality in general, the more I think about that. I'm currently slowly working on getting an energy recovery ventilator in my house. I'd like to go through a duct design company, like Allison Bales is Energy Vanguard. I would like to have them do a duct design for my house and do a really well installed ERV.
That sounds like a
Yeah, it's
fantastic
something I think
article
about
if
all
you're
the time.
listening, Allison. Maybe we could all partner and get that done for you, Evan. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I would love it. It's something, and the motivator for me, and it's been hard when I'm talking with clients and an ERV is the solution. I don't have a good company to say, here's a good contact. I tell them that fresh air is essential. And so part of what I'm trying to do is walk through that process, understand the costs, and do it for my own health and my family's health. But then I can really look them in the eye and tell them what the process is like. And I love what everything that Allison and his company do. And if I can direct them to a company like that, who can then give a plan to an installer, that's number one. Because the downside of what I see is when there's amazing HVAC installers, and again, credit to their industry because it is a challenging, incredibly challenging work. But if you just ask a HVAC contractor, I want an ERV or I want a fresh air intake, of course they can do it, but is it done well? Is it balancing? Are you drawing in more humidity and creating more issues than you're fixing? So it's a complicated issue, but that's the goal I want. I want to find a good contractor that I can refer my clients to take care of their indoor air quality issues when it comes to ventilation.
How are you monitoring the air in your house? You mentioned PM 2.5. That's one of a handful of things I know of that most people pay attention to. How are you
Yeah.
monitoring your air?
One of the easy tools that I found was the Hayward score. I think it's Hayward score. That is I should have done a little more research on this one, but basically it's a like a short quiz that you take on your house that you answer these questions about location, occupants, and it gives you this score based on all of these factors about what your indoor air quality is. So for instance, I don't remember mine off the top of my head, but I'm very close to some highways. And so those highways are going to be putting a lot into the air that I don't want in my house. And so as far as monitoring, I don't have monitoring in my house yet. Part of what I'll do with that ERV is I'll have a standalone thermostat for it. Is what I would like, and I'll have sensors in say the bathrooms that are going to ideally kick on whenever there's a particulate rise or a humidity issue, and then that will take care of that. I have occasionally run through my house with my particle counter, which is something else I keep in my toolbox that just tells me different size particles and measured in microns per liter of air. And so I'll run through the house with that. To be frank, I don't monitor it that closely on my house because I don't have a vented hood above my kitchen. I live close to a highway. And so I'm working on the solution, which is an ERV. But until that's in, I'm not sure I need to know what the PM 2.5 is. Otherwise, I'd probably be obsessing about it.
That's why I don't monitor the indoor air quality in my barn because I have a wood stove and it's better I don't know, right?
Right. Yeah. And I talk about that with clients too. As I said, I tell them information is not always beneficial. So let's talk about what your goals are. Like if I know, when I bought this house, I did a couple of indoor air quality samples and they turned out fine. But like a human, I didn't dig that deep because I wanted the house. So, information is good. I think the other thing that colors my monitoring or lack of monitoring strategy is the cost. Like I know like my particle counter is a multi-$1,000 piece of equipment, courtesy of Tom. And I know the shortcomings of the lower quality monitors. And I see them create a lot of anxiety for clients. They're like, my humidity's at 60%. I'm like, well, my expensive hygrometer is saying you're in like the 40 range, so I think you're okay. So it's kind of managing what information I want.
It's like when you go to the web for medical advice, right? You always end up with some horrible condition, right?
It's always cancer.
Some horrible thing.
It's always cancer, no matter what.
So part of what delighted me about your original email included a photograph of a Shim Screw, yes. A GRK Topstar is the brand I'm familiar with. Did you get a chance to try it out?
I have not gotten to try it out, but that was a huge head scratcher for me. I could not for the life of me. Like, how do you even search that particular, fastener online? Like rotating head GRK, like it didn't happen. So, but what I will be using, my sister wants to replace a very oddly sized pocket door. I think it's 42 inches wide with some other form of bathroom door. And so again, this is in the 70s pier and beam, so it's not level. So those fasteners or those micro adjustments will be, perfect. Like I was going to use nails, like the old school hanging method for a pre-hung, and make adjustments that way. But if we ever get around to this project, I'll definitely be buying those fasteners.
They're super cool. And I mean, it wouldn't
very cool.
It wouldn't prevent me hanging a door if I didn't have them, but I tell you, they are super cool. And especially if you're
because go ahead.
I was going to say, especially if you have a wonky condition, it's a no-brainer because then you can fix it later.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like anything that happens at that house, it needs to be adjustable because it's going to move again. And I've learned because of the projects I'm doing are relatively small and short, and largely because my sister is funding them. I can buy quality fasteners, little things that make the job easier, and get her house back. Because I'm busy with work and life, so I try to get these projects done in a weekend or so I can knock it out, move on to the next one.
Do you work on your own place? Can you tell me about where you live?
I do. I always chuckle when y'all talk about air sealing because I'm a fanatic about it. So, having a young child, budget is tight. I'm not ripping apart bathrooms or anything. But for my own house, this last weekend, or a couple weekends ago, while it was cool, I was shuffling the insulation around in my attic and using a spray foam gun. That's the top loading spray foam guns, which can't recommend them highly enough.
Right.
So much fun. So I was spray foaming around the duct boots. I rehung the ductwork in my attic, straightened it out, tightened it up a little bit. What did we do? I re-insulated the skylights, tried to air seal those. The thing actually that I was going to write into you guys about is I would like to extract the blown in, it's the yellow fiberglass blown in insulation. I would like to reuse that, but obviously it's got all kinds of debris in it. And so I don't want to damage the machine, but that's kind of a project I've been bouncing around is take it all out, air seal everything, top plates, and then replace it. But if I can use the same insulation, that's not, I don't have a rodent issue, so I could theoretically reuse it. How do you clean out that insulation so it can be reused? So perhaps for another time.
The folks that I'm familiar with who do that work say you really shouldn't reuse it because the blower is so expensive, right? Like you don't want nails and stuff going through it, and the extraction vacs, like they're made to deal with the nails and knots and stuff that's going to inevitably be in there. But I'm told that the blowing machines are not, so they just throw it away, even though it seems like a terrible waste. I agree.
Yeah. It's something I would really like to do, and that's. The frugal side of me is like, oh, this is perfectly functional. I can't get rid of it. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about a multi-$1,000 machine that I, run a nail through, it's not worth it. I think there's that. Go ahead.
What's next?
The ERV is the main focus. Just kind of walking through that process, slowly working on the budget for that, saving up for that, because I like to be able to just pay for it outright. In an interim, finding a good installer and a good contractor, which obviously Energy Vanguard would be the preference, but and I don't think it'd be an issue to have DFW clients going over to Energy Vanguard. But yeah, ERV is the next thing. Although we're a townhouse, we have an HOA, and our sprinklers were rotting the frame of my front door. So there's a bottom piece of rot, and I think y'all just did. Well, I'm listening to y'all's back episodes, but y'all did discuss replacing, I think, the door jamb. And it makes me hesitant to like dig into that rotted area and try to replace it because it could turn into who knows what.
Yeah, so Mike would tell you just to jam some Bondo in there and get on with your life, and I can't disagree, right?
I know that the do it right part of me is like, I got to do it right. But yeah, I think the Bondo and paint's probably the way to go.
Evan, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Is there anything you'd like to ask or tell our listeners before we part company? I
don't think so. We can be found online at All Mold Pro, ALLMOLDPRO. I try to post a lot of stuff on Instagram that is helpful for consumers, beneficial, gives perspective on mold and the indoor air quality industry in general. But yeah, you can find us at our same website, and we'd love to answer questions. If somebody has a question, we're happy to help.
Oh, and right into the podcast with your question, and maybe we can have it on one of our future episodes, Evan, with your answer, either live or recorded, and that would be super fun, right? Yeah.
Yep, I would love to meet the gang. Y'all keep me company on my multi-hour commutes every day.
I never get tired of people telling me that, man. So thank you very much.
Yep, I listen to you guys at 1.5 speed, so I blasted the episodes. I enjoy them.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Evan for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Evan, thanks a million. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Carrie, thanks for producing. Stay safe, everybody.